This is Counseling Conversations with Carmel, Kyle, and Christine. And today we are going to be talking about credentialing and provider enrollment with Yesenia Servin, who is a provider enrollment specialist and a certified professional medical services management.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be with you.
Yeah, welcome, welcome. We're excited to have you. This is a huge topic because credentialing is something that every clinician in private practice has to go through. And in fact, before we can even start our practice, in most cases, we have to go through the credentialing process. So thank you for being here with us today.
I'm excited, and I've met so many of you over the years, and so I'm very glad that we're connected.
I've actually taken one of your trainings on Medicare through, it was either ICA or IMCA. And so I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to limit them and maybe contact you off of this recording to ask you some additional questions. But I know that there's so much interest around this topic with clinicians because this isn't something that we really understand. We're trained in something completely different. So I'm really excited to, talk about this topic as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so I've been doing this for a very long time, over 24 years. I started back when I was a young kid working with an allergist. And then I went to work with a DME company, durable medical equipment company. And then I went to community mental health. And that's really where I learned more of that individual credentialing and provider enrollment. Originally, I learned it from a DME standpoint, but there was one physician that I had to deal with who's ordering tons of durable medical equipment across, different specialties. But for mental health, it was in community mental health, so Medicare, Medicaid, every single payer available, right? Because of the funding, they needed all the funding available. So that's where it all started. And with that, I had a lot of practitioners say, hey, I've given a lot of time to this nonprofit. I'm ready to start my own business, right? Like we mentioned earlier, so many of them were like ready and experts in their field, all the modalities that they've trained in, but hated this part of it, the credentialing. People were scared of it, terrified of it. They're like, I don't want to touch it. And since you already do it on this scale, can you just do it for me? And so that's how it all got started, where it became so busy that I was like, okay, this can actually be a full-time job because now everybody's communicating and letting them know, hey, you need help with this credentialing piece, Yesenia Servin. So thankfully, my mental health connections and professionals got it to help me grow where it is now. So I've been doing this for several years. The thing that I hear the most, quite honestly, from practitioners, not only mental health practitioners, is they're like, I'm terrified of Medicare and Medicaid. Let's not touch that. I don't want to mess with the government. Let's go to the Blues. Let's go to Aetna, UHC. It feels a little safer. But I want to dissipate that fear a little bit. It's actually one of the greatest payers. Medicare, to me, I always encourage mental health practitioners to go for it. Like, let's break it down and really walk through it. And we'll do it. I know that we're going to talk about it as we keep, in our conversation. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself. But the thing that I also like partnering with mental health practitioners is because you have that passion to serve our community with the various skills and techniques that you obtain over all the training, all the multiple CEs that you keep obtaining. And for me, the passion is enrollment. Like, I truly love credentialing. I truly love reading a contract and telling you what's in that contract. I like negotiating for you when you're like, hey, I was told I can't negotiate. I always tell you that's false. You can negotiate. Let's work on, how we're going to approach it, but you can definitely negotiate. So all of those pieces are things that I'm very passionate about. So I think that we complement each other very well because you're serving our communities in a different way and I'm helping you serve the community.
That's so helpful, and bless you for doing what you do because as you said, so many practitioners are very scared of, we don't want to do anything to mess it up because it's like a different language almost that you need to know. And when I've recently gone through some credentialing myself, some re-credentialing myself, and I see the applications and I just like panic. My brain literally just starts having anxiety because I'm like, I don't know what any of this means. It's asking for all these different numbers and you're kind of like, oh my gosh, where is that number? And you're
Right.
looking, so you're looking for the number and you're like, wait, what number is this number? Where do I find that one? You know,
Mhm.
there's always kind of 20 steps to like complete one, and it does get very overwhelming. So we're grateful for you also in our community and the services that you provide.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think about it in the same way, right? Whenever I've had an experience where someone needs mental health professional, like I can't help. I feel the same as you, like, oh my God, I'm like stuck, I'm frozen. How do I help? Do I call some, like, so it's almost the same exact way. Like you have your expertise and I have mine, and that's why we work so well together.
Perfect.
Yeah, I always tell clinicians that one of the ways to be the most efficient therapist in private practice is to focus on what you specialize in and hire people to do the things that you don't. So this is great.
Perfect. Perfect. Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
Even if it's just for consultation. I mean, like, I think like a lot of us attempt to do things ourselves, and then some box wasn't checked or filled in accurately, and it's hard to try to go then find the answer. So even if it's just as a consulting someone to help you manage that process.
And so, part of what our team does is help you train your team. So what I've found with mental health practitioners, you guys are always saving the world, and I appreciate that. But I've noticed that you have a lot of connections. You're like, well, now I have my practice. I want to hire my friend. I want to hire my family member to be my admin person. And that's wonderful, right? That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to build up our circle. And, if we're rising, we should help others rise. So I always say, listen, I think that it's great that you're hiring them, but then at least hire us to tell them, hey, you're billing correctly. Hey, this credentialing, you need to do it this way. For Medicare, you got to do this. For Blue Cross. So at least hire an expert that helps that person in your life that's helping your practice, right? Because as you're helping them, they still need to understand what it looks like in Illinois, what it looks like in Wisconsin, what it looks like to have multiple licenses across different regions. So at least give them that, because that will really help your entire practice. So I get it. I see it. I think it's one of the things that I've seen even more. Like I see someone say, hey, my husband's helping me. My eldest daughter's helping me. My neighbor, who's been my neighbor for 25 years, is helping me. Wonderful. But at least get an expert to help them, and then you'll be fully successful, right? Even if it's that initial investment that you have to make, because a lot of people say, oh, that's too much money because now I'm paying you and I'm paying them. Right. But in the long run, you'll have a very stable revenue cycle. You don't have to worry about, like, is that one going to get paid? Is this claim going to get paid? Oh my God, it didn't. So what did we do wrong here? And then backtrack on that.
It's called peace of mind and an insurance policy. Worth every
Exactly.
penny.
Exactly. Yes.
It'll save you a lot of time and money in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, you've already answered a little bit of the next question that we wanted to ask you. One being, what do mental health professionals need to know about credentialing? You've pretty much given us a good jump start on that.
Yes, yes. And credentialing, the way that it's truly defined is that insurance is checking all that package that we submitted, right? Does that license truly active and there's no adverse actions on it? Is that education real? Let's go to that student clearinghouse and double check. So they're doing all those pieces to verify that you are who you say you are, or that packet is truly a reflection of um, all the work and everything that you do in your specialty. So that's credentialing. Provider enrollment is the request for us to enroll in their panel. Hey, you have our credentialing packet. Can you enroll us? Can you make us a participating provider in network, because we want those in network dollars? So sometimes when you're talking to the insurance reps, and sometimes I don't even talk to you, they just want you to email everything now. They'll use a lot of language that can sometimes be confusing. And I know it can sound like a cynic. To me, I feel like sometimes they do it on purpose. The confusion part can be thrown at us at purpose. So just so you know, when they're talking like that, that's what they're talking about. They're reviewing your credentials, and then they're enrolling you as an in-network participant.
Is that also the contracting part?
Then there's a contracting part. It feels like never ending. It keeps going. So then
Yeah.
the contract, yes, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think the words are used interchangeably, but they are different.
Right. Right. Then the contracting part is actually committing you to those rates, to that fee schedule, to like you promised you'll have every, the claim submitted between that 90 days. So you're basically committing to all those terms on that contract. That's the contracting piece. And that gets loaded into their system as the last portion of the credentialing cycle.
I think I understand. So there's credentialing,
Mm-hmm.
provider enrollment, and
Yep.
then contracting.
Right.
Is
Which
that
seals
kind
the
of
deal.
which seals the deal? That's
Yeah.
like, I'm signing on the dotted line that I'm going to follow all your rules and this is
Yep.
the money you're going to give me.
Right.
Okay. And is that kind of the process too? Is it kind of
Just like that.
chronological in that way? Okay.
Yep.
That's really helpful to know. Because I think a lot of times too, if you're not in private practice or you're not starting your own practice, you might go to an agency or community mental health where they do it for you.
Right.
And so you think that there's just like, the Wizard of Oz behind the door that waves the wand and makes it happen. But this is important information because, like you said, a lot of times when people come from community mental health or an agency or a bigger organization that do all of this stuff for you, you think, oh yeah, I can just kind of sign up, start my own practice, but there's so much more to it than
Mm-hmm.
people realize. And that's when I think, like, I do some consulting with people who open practices, and that's what happens. They'll get stuck in the middle of one of those processes because they don't
Right.
understand what's happening, and it delays their whole process. So I think it's helpful for every clinician to know, like, this goes on behind the scenes regardless
Mm-hmm.
of if you're involved or not. Someone's doing this for you if you're a licensed clinician, and obviously depending on the insurance company situation, but it's always good to have this information and understand the process.
Yes, and that's why sometimes when you call or get a response from them, they'll say, "Oh yes, we've completed provider enrollment," and so you're like, "Wonderful, I'm in." And then when you say, "What's that effective date?" "Oh, we don't have that yet." That means they haven't finished loading that contract, so they're still on that last piece. So they're giving you halfway good news, right? Where you're like, "Yay, they say provider enrollment is complete." You're like, "Oh, no effective date yet." Like, you just blew my whole bubble, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's
And you're like,
why
oh, I
sometimes
can't
you have that. Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
can't see clients until that effective date. Yeah.
Right. Right.
With that insurance.
Yeah. Yesenia, when someone has been credentialed through a mental health facility, a community mental health facility, and they leave that facility, do they have to re-credential or go through that process again once they start private practice?
I love that question because that comes up a lot. So, because the tax ID for your private practice is brand new to that network, it's like a brand new application, right? So, if you were just going from one employer to the next, you can technically submit a demographic update where you're like, hey, I'm no longer at this practice. Here's the one sheet to tell you what new practice I'm in. But that practice is already established with that payer, that network, right? But for your brand new practice, you need a completely new application because you're telling them, here's my practice NPI, here's my practice EIN, here's our name, here's our location, all new information to that network.
Okay. And I want to add something to that question. So it's kind of a two-sided question. If someone is working in private practice and they are credentialed and they have a contract with a payer under their personal NPI number and tax ID number, they're just sharing office space, that type of thing, and then they relocate to a new location, they're no longer at that location. Do they have to re-credential at that point, or is it just demographic updates?
It is a demographic update, but here's what I tell most people that are doing that. Don't term your old office address until they've confirmed that new one. Because, different reps get trained differently or different reps absorb the training differently. So they'll term everything. And it's like, wait a minute, how do I have this gap in coverage? And it's like, oh, because the rep entered the wrong date and she gave you like 3 days of gap because she termed you on 1/1 here, but didn't start your new practice till 1/4. So then there's that strange missing piece. So I always say submit your update first and your add location first and make that your primary. Once you get confirmation that they did it, then go back and term that old address.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
And those come up a lot.
I'm
leases, you got to check those leases. You got to go to the best place where you can serve people at a good cost.
Certainly.
I have so many questions. I feel like I have to be very intentional with which ones I want to ask you. Just for people who are listening, is there anything that you're seeing, like trends on your end of the industry related to mental health? Is there anything that mental health professionals should be aware of or mindful of in any of that?
So when you are, I want us to talk about it globally, but then every person is unique, right? Every practice is unique. So I just want you to consider it in terms of the way you apply it. So I always recommend that practitioners, whether you're in solo practice or working for an employer, serve Medicare and that you become a Medicare participant. I've heard that people are terrified of it. They don't know Medicare Advantage. They don't know Medicare Supplement. And that's the biggest thing I found, that once you join Medicare, you think you can take anything that says Medicare. No, that's the big mistake. That's a trend that I do see, that they're like, well, you said it was Medicare. I'm like, yes, but we walked through, you are not with this Medicare Advantage plan. You are with this one, you're not with this one. So there's a big chunk of money that gets lost because practitioners think Medicare means everything under the sun under Medicare, and that's not the case. And it can be very scary because it equals a lot of dollars, right? So what happens as well, now that we're at the end of the year, a lot of Medicare Advantage plans term and new ones come to the market. So a few of them are terming at the end of this year, and one will have like a batch of other ones that will be serving that Medicare community. So then it's capturing all of those to make sure that you're in those and don't miss out on them. And right now that's very important because we're in that December, January time. So now not only do you have to wear those yearly deductibles, you have to worry about those plans now that are terming and new ones coming on. So very important. So the biggest trend I find, downfall, is people missing out on that Medicare Advantage money because they assumed they were part of that Medicare participation. So very separate. And please don't do that. Just triple check. Don't be scheduling. I see practitioners or their intake team scheduling like crazy without, confirming that Medicare plan is actually one that you're taking.
I feel like I'm a very visual person. So like I need like a map of how I like to know if I understand how something works, then it's in my brain forever. If I don't, I get lost and scattered and I can't navigate myself. So I need like a map of or a visual of how Medicare works because I was that person when counselors recently were able to start taking Medicare and applying for Medicare. I was like, I don't even I took your training to try to understand, and I was like, I'm not at the place where I know what any of this means yet. So I got scared too, and I opted out. Um, I would like to opt in the next cycle because it'll be next year that I can apply to opt in. And I mean, I might just come to you and be like, can you help me navigate this? But I was really scared too. Like I kind of need to know how it works because there's third party payers, which I'm learning a little bit about. Like there's third party payers because some of the insurance companies kind of automatically enroll you in it if you apply with them and you're credentialed and enroll with them. They automatically put you under like a Medicare, well, I can't even remember the insurance company that it was that did that for me, but I was like, oh, I didn't even. And then I was confused because I was like, well, I opted out. So does that mean I can't take this or I can take this? Like I'm confused. So I think that like just there's a lack of education in our field and understanding how it all works. And then understanding the billing portion and the credentialing portion. I think they're like two separate things to understand. And I think it'll be easier for people to opt in. And I think more people would if they understood how it worked.
Completely agree. And I appreciate that because I can create those visuals because for me, it's in my head, right? But I can create those visuals and make it part of that training or that slideshow or those tools because then you can edit it and to you whatever you're needed and make it like kind of like a cheat sheet for your front desk or for yourself.
Yeah. Like because we're coming from, the big four, right? The private pay lens of things. And people are already scared of documentation changes because there's like different documentation. So people are scared of that.
I'm terrified of it. I'm not a clinician.
That's a fear that we have already going in. Like, okay, well, I don't really know exactly what the documentation looks like, but everybody talks about how scary it is. and how specific it is. And if it's not right, you don't get paid. Right. So that's already like a fear lens
Mm.
that we're looking through, walking through that door. And it's a little bit different because social workers, they've been able to bill for Medicare for a long
Forever.
time.
Hmm.
So like there's
I
like
think it
not,
was
they don't have the
86.
same fear. Yeah, they don't have that same fear because they've always been allowed to do it. So I think now that counselors have this um new opportunity, I most of the people I've talked to said, yeah, I opted out because there's so much fear in what that
Hmm.
is. And so to kind of like get underneath that fear and educate more about like, this is what the system looks like, this is what this means, and then kind of go into, I mean, documentation is a different conversation, but yeah, I think that would really help to ease a lot of like, especially counselors' fears. And I'd be curious if there's statistics out there of, now that counselors can opt in, how many actually did, because I think that will also be telling of like what the field still needs to know about
Hmm.
credentialing and those sorts of structures. So I appreciate you saying that you might, restructure some slides. That'd be helpful, I think, for me at least.
No, and I'm sure others feel that way too. I'm sure if you're thinking about it that way, others feel the same way. So that would be very helpful, and I can definitely create those tools. But I also always have the Medicare treatment plan template. I get it directly from my
Oh, that's
Medicare rep,
awesome.
so I can give that to you all so you can share it with everybody. Um, and I do try to encourage everyone to try to remove that fear because Medicare is actually a great payer. Within 10 business days of you billing a clean claim, you'll have that money in your bank account. So it's one of those payers that you can actually trust. You know how you're always like, wait, BCBS pays me always on this timeline. Like you kind of get to know their cycle.
Hmm.
Medicare
Hmm.
is one of those that you can trust their cycle.
And I
So
had
I
heard that. Yeah.
Really great payer. People are like, I hate it. I've heard it's horrible. I heard they don't pay well. All not true. I think they sometimes get confused with Medicaid because Medicaid, I try to discourage you from taking it unless you're serving a very specific population and that's the specialty, right? That you want. And that's, some of the goals that you're doing. And I greatly appreciate that. But if that's not your population, then I always try to tell you that it is terrifying, that I've worked in it with years and I've fought I would say many of my hours has been fighting Medicaid to collect money, fighting managed care, Medicaid plans to collect money. So I do understand that part. But with Medicare, I always say it is like clockwork. You can trust it. You can really depend on it. You can also have supervision options, which people didn't know that. There is a language in the Medicare manual that if you are an LCSW, you can supervise over an LSW serving Medicare members. If you are an LCPC, you can supervise LPCs that are seeing Medicare members, right? It's all about following that treatment plan and making sure that's in the treatment plan and that you actually are providing supervision.
Wait, so let me understand. Is there payment for supervision, or you're just saying that LPCs can see people with Medicare?
LPCs can see people with Medicare and
Okay.
LSWs can, as long as, so similar to how you do with Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? You have
Okay.
that supervisor
Yeah.
on the claims and they're
Okay. So
actually
like supervisory
supervising.
billing.
Exactly. Exactly. So there's
That
a
is
lot
really
of,
helpful.
yeah, there's a lot of great benefits, right? There's a lot of great benefits to serving a population that needs the services.
Well, and that's interesting because I think when we got initial information as counselors about Medicare, that we were able to enroll and contract and apply to take Medicare, it was 4 letters only. So I think the initial thought process about it was that there, like, supervisory billing wasn't an option.
So it is only the 4 letters that should be enrolled.
Right, right. So they are enrolling, but then if
But
you have someone underneath you that you're supervising, you
yes,
can do that. So only
yes,
licensed clinicians, not unlicensed clinicians. Is that correct?
correct,
Okay.
correct.
That's really helpful to know. I didn't know that.
Hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like there needs to be a training on debunking myths and fears on Medicare.
Oh,
Hmm.
that sounds like a perfect title. Yes. It's
Yes.
a
And
great
you could
idea.
use one of us. We'll just ask all the questions that we don't understand, and then it'll all come out. We'll help
Yeah.
you. We'll help you with the formulate the training.
That's perfect.
Well, I want to ask about mistakes that counselors make when credentialing. What are some of the most common mistakes? And before you answer that, Yesenia, I want to say something that I think a lot of counselors don't know starting out when they are not necessarily connected or getting proper training prior to getting started in credentialing with insurance companies. Using your social security number for credentialing rather than using a tax ID number. I think it's usually down the road when a lot of people learn that. And usually, if you're connected with the right people, that's not necessarily something that you would do to start out. But what are the risks involved with that?
Yes, it hurt my heart to hear you say that because I do see that mistake. That is a big one. I think it's lessened now. Now that there's more training out there, more, networking between all the colleagues. But I think that's a huge mistake because you have to think about how that SSN will be on all the claims, all those applications, right? Because Medicare did say, hey, if you're a solo provider and you don't want to get an EIN, then just apply as a solo provider and use your SSN. But that SSN then has been transposed to so many platforms and so many documents. To me, it's terrifying. I always say, please just make it very clean. Um, and that's another little investment that you have to make if you want to, or you can do it yourself, but have that EIN, have that tax ID, make it clean and separate. And then it becomes a little bit tedious too when you have to file taxes, right? Because let's say you have your part-time and you started your practice as your side, right? Which happens a lot. I work with a lot of practitioners that I'm not leaving the employer yet. I'm still there 2 days a week. So then it becomes a little bit messy as to like, oh, these expenses were for my practice and these actually my employer reimbursed me. It just doesn't become clean enough. So you want to make sure you keep that EIN. And that's one of the biggest mistakes. The other mistake is as, as soon as you get your EIN, get your practice NPI. Sometimes people wait because they're like, well, I have my own NPI. You do, but you want to get a practice NPI that matches your EIN, right? Because then everything with Medicare is clean. Medicare says, I see your practice, I see your EIN. The same with every other payer. I see your practice, I see the EIN, I see the NPI that matches them. I see you, I see your NPI, and we're linking everything together. So it's just much cleaner to follow and do a follow through on that. The other big mistake that I make that I see, Freudian slip I make, the other big mistake that I do see is sometimes practitioners don't keep their NPI profile updated, and that can be a big holdup when you're submitting applications because they'll say, hey, this practitioner still shows on their NPI profile that they're a student, they're a mental health student. And it's like, you really are an LCPC and your application shows LCPC, all of that, but then your profile over here is incorrect. So that's a huge mistake. Make sure you go into that NPI, update it, update your business information in there, update your contact information, and absolutely update your specialty. You're no longer a student, you're a practicing professional, whether that's counselor or social worker. You want to make sure it's accurate.
That's really helpful. A lot of people don't know that there's an NPI, like we call it an NPI 2. There's like a 1
Yes.
and a 2. So 1 is like for individual, like your individual person, and 2 is for an organization.
Yep, exactly. And when you do your enrollment, you want it to be really clean and really obvious to that network or that rep on that other side. Like, okay, this is the practice info and this is the individual info.
Yeah, and getting a tax ID number or an NPI it's a rapid process. I mean, it's a matter of minutes. When you log on, you fill out the electronic document and you have it right away.
Mm-hmm. I remember, I don't know if you all remember, you're probably much younger than me, but I remember when NPIs first came in, when the government required that, and we had to fill out a paper application. It was like 7 pages. And then if you had to make a correction, you'd have to fill out that same application again and wait in the mail, like mail it out, let it come back in. One time, one practice that I started working with, I think it was like 2017. No, 2007. We got this letter saying you've applied 6 times. Why did you apply? Because I guess they had like a different receptionist do it every time and they didn't realize that somebody had already done it. And you'd have to wait for that snail mail to tell you like, hey, here it is. This is the actual one. Don't use all these 7. So it used to be a hassle, but now it's instant. Just like you said, it's like you get it right there. It's perfect.
Yeah. Technology is great.
Absolutely. And that's with Medicare too. The Medicare application is online. You submit that. They have to confirm within 10 business days that they've received it and that they're looking at it. So it's not like guesswork where now with every other payer, you're having to call to see like, did you get it? Are you missing anything? Do I have to send anything else in? Medicare will instantly tell you, we got it. We're working on it. Expect some information within 30 days.
So talking a little bit about private practice and when, like we kind of were just there a little bit, where people are taking steps right away to, like you said, get NPI, get your tax ID or your EIN number going. What are some of the next steps that you would say are like the most important for contracting and credentialing?
So the first thing is put a hold on scheduling people because clinicians get so excited. They're like, I submitted everything, so I'm going to start scheduling and filling. Please put the brakes on that, right? Let's go a little bit slower with that. The next step after you've submitted, you want to make sure that within 10 business days, you're checking in on that application. I never say wait longer than that. Within those first 10 days, check in, make sure they received it. Do they need anything else from you? And then after that, every 2 weeks. But then I say, make sure if you're using a platform, if you're going to use any billing platform, that you start connecting that information. There's some background info that you'll have to start entering, right? Did you enter your location info? Did you select the insurances that you're going to be working with? Do you have that banking information? That banking information has to match. For Medicare, Medicare is extremely strict that your Medicare name, the name on your application for your practice is the same exact name in your checkbook or that savings account. Whatever those two are, it has to be exact. There can't be an extra comma. There can't be a period after LLC. Whatever your IRS letter shows, that is what better reflect on your checking account. So those EFT, you have to check. Are you enrolled with Availity? Are you enrolled with CAQH? There's 1,000,001 profiles you have to make sure it matches in all of these pieces, right? I know that there has been some work to get one profile to link to every other profile that you have to complete. But I mean, there's powers that be that don't let that happen. That would be such a great solution for all of us. But it's not going to happen now. So you have to manually check. Are you even registered with Availity? Because you're going to need Availity to get information on, is this a valid insurance, verification of benefits. You're going to need it to double check payments. Do they even have my correct EFT info? You're going to need it as a clearinghouse for so many pieces. And so there's all these pieces that we actually have a checklist that's another tool that I can provide because I already have it. And you can share with all of our listeners. That'll be perfect. But it gives you a real thorough breakdown of all the pieces you have to complete right after you get your EIN, right after you get your NPI, right when you're ready to submit all these applications. There's so many business portions that you still have to get through before you start scheduling any of those clients, any of those members.
Great. Yesenia, today we're seeing something quite different than we have in the past. There are various companies out there like Alma and Headway and Growth Therapy, et cetera. And a lot of them claim to take all the guesswork out of credentialing and contracting and such. And so a lot of clinicians in private practice are going that route because, once again, it saves you time and money. What are the advantages and disadvantages from your perspective of getting involved or going through such companies for credentialing and contracting?
Yes, there's been many companies that are doing now, and they're a solution for sure. I've heard both people that love it and people that hate it. So the one of the positives is that they take all of that business portion away from you, right? Like you don't have to worry about it. They'll give you like effective dates, like, hey, you're effective immediately, 1/1 with all these 3 payers that you wanted, or these 5 payers, whatever you decide, right? The payer listing that's going to work for you. So that's the really great part. I've heard that customer service is not always the best, depending on which one you're working with. And then I've heard that reduction in the fee can be a little bit hurtful sometimes. So it depends. If you're trying to grow and it's your first time and you really don't want to take any carryover clients from your employer because you're scared of that, non-compete or any of that, which I think we're supposed to get rid of now anyway. But if you really want to build up and you're like, hey, I'm ready to do 30 hours immediately, 30 hours a week immediately, it's a good route to go. But if you need more of like that one-on-one personal connection where it's like, hey, you need to make sure that let's look at your billing platform together, whether that's Therapy Notes, Theranos, Simple Practice, any other one, ECW. Let's look at it one-on-one together. Let's look at your EFT together. Let's look at your Medicare together. If you need more of that and you want to build actually someone within your practice, an administrative person that you're trying to build up to do so, you would partner with someone more like us, right? But if you're like, I just don't want to deal with any of it ever, or at least for this season in my life, I just don't want it. Just let me sign the dotted line and tell me my effective dates. Let's go for it. I don't care about that percentage that you're taking for right now. So those are the reasons, like you decide what works for you, and every season changes, right? Some things that work for you this year, you're going to hate next year. You're going to be like, why did I ever do that? Well, it was good for me during that time, but now I want my 5% difference. I don't want anybody taking my 8% because that 8% means a lot to me. So yeah, I never badmouth them. I think whatever solution works for you, do it, go for it, right? And if you tried it and you hate it, it's okay. Like we're ready to hug you and take you and help you.
Thank you for that.
This is so helpful. All of this is such great information. I know we're like running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to try to look and see what are some really important things that I think people would want to know. You mentioned earlier about negotiations and insurance rates. I know that's something I see frequently asked on like the Facebook communities. Do you have any advice about that, on how to do that?
Yes, that's always a good hot topic. And I think, to be honest with you, in the climate that we are now, we are in a good stance to actually request rate negotiation. So I always recommend that you get a group of colleagues, and then when you appeal to them requesting this, you really have to appeal. Say, this is the population that I serve, very specific. I'm going to give you a couple. I have a practitioner in her practice. Her team serve people who have lost toddlers, infants, and pregnancies. Very specific, right? And so they serve not only those parents, but they serve the grandparents, siblings. So it's a very unique situation, and they have great negotiating power because there's such a unique look. There's practitioners that only serve one in particular. He only serves children who have or had incarcerated parents and that trauma, right? So very specific. He always had really great rate negotiations. Other practitioners, just other examples, very specific with LGBTQ, very specific cultural, ethnicity. So there's a lot of things that you can hone in on and say, in my region or in my zip code, there's only 5 of us doing this kind of very specific work, right? So you really have to break it down. Are there extra languages? Are you serving people with different abilities, right? So do you serve the blind? Do you have Braille? Do you serve the deaf? So all of these other unique things that you can emphasize on, and those networks need you. They need you to serve the members that have all this information or that are living in these different situations. And so you have to make sure that you're appealing to all of that, providing actual statistics, like in the US, this many people with this type of situation. Like really break it down, like in my modalities, everything that you actually do and the way that you serve, give them the real numbers, right? Give them the numbers of like, hey, if I don't treat this, this is what can eventually happen to this person. And we want this person to be a great member of our society, and all the modalities that I'm working with or all the modalities that I give to my community is helping to make our communities a better world. So really break it down, not only to the heartstrings, but with the data, because all those numbers are available to us, right? So I always say, get a group of you, break it down on all your appeals. There is a template that I have, another tool that I already have that I can share with you. So just know that you guys are going to get a lot of PDFs, and so your memberships will have, and all of them are editable. So you edit them to fit you and your needs and the community that you're serving. So yes, it is true that you can negotiate. You just have to make sure that they understand who you are and how you're serving their members. That's the biggest piece.
That's really helpful. And I know that there are templates out there too, out in the universe of the virtual universe, that people use to write letters or, send those in. I know we typically do that like once a year. We
Together, yep.
Once a year.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Just, so it's for raises as well as contract negotiations. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, as we get closer to wrapping up today, I do have another question for you, Yesenia. What suggestions do you have for clinicians who decide that they no longer want to accept clients that are insured by a specific insurance company? Is it legal to simply stop accepting those clients, or is there a process that must take place in order to formally remove yourself as an in-network provider with that particular insurance company?
So we're really supposed to be able, and that's a good question, because it does come up, and I know it can be stressful when you're like, hey, this ABC insurance is paying me $7 for an hour of my work. Like, that's insulting. I'm not doing this anymore, right? So I get it. But there is a process, and every network is different. Every network will say you need to give us 30 days, or you need to give us, whatever it is. So you need to give that notice. You do need to give that notice, and then you can stop because you have proof that you've given them a notice. The fact that they don't accept it is not really up to you, right? As long as you have the notice and you have confirmation that they've received it. So you have to call and confirm that they've received it, get that reference number, get that name, and the name of that person who is confirming that reference number, that they have that in hand. We've had one of the payers, and actually one of the bigger payers, tell us, oh no, you can't give us this notice. We're going to term you at the end of this contract, which is a year from that original date. And we're like, no, we're from Illinois and we can term it when we want to, cause or no cause. We've given you written notice and that's all we need to do. So sometimes you will get those payers that are like, oh, no, you have to fulfill to the end of the year. And it's like, no, I don't. Right. It's like an employer saying, no, we said you'd have to be here. Excuse me. If I said it's not working, it's not working. Right. So that is the scary part, where you have to just get confirmation that you notified them you're terming. So make sure you do that. And I understand, I don't know if you've dealt with this, but some of the PCPs in my area now, I'm in like the Berwyn Oak Park area, have become strictly private pay. They've like wiped the slate clean. Like, I'm not taking anything. This is what it is when you come in. This is what it is if you want to do a monthly, more of like that concierge style of care. And I understand, because sometimes it feels like too much. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's a million applications. It's a million profiles. So I get it. I see both sides to it for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely overwhelming, but not impossible. And that's why we have people like you to help us navigate these things. So thank you so much, Yesenia, for coming on today and giving us all this wonderful information. I think this will be a huge episode that people will want to listen to, because people are always having questions about this. So if you're ever up for coming back on, we would love to have you again after we get some feedback.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to send you all those tools, and I think I'm going to rework the visuals and that slide deck, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yes. Well, once again, thank you so much, Yesenia. And folks, you've heard it from an expert on credentialing and provider enrollment and contracting today, Yesenia Servin. And hey, she's for hire. What is your contact information, Yesenia?
Yes, so you can reach me at info@yscredentialing.com. So try to make it easy, info@yscredentialing.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn, connect with me, Yesenia Servin. let's say you don't need my services now, but I'm constantly posting, hey, here's a new Medicare update, here's a new Blue Cross update. So I'm constantly posting so that you have the latest information in the industry.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Those of you who are listening, connect with Yesenia, follow her on social media, and we will see you guys on our next episode. Goodbye.
Bye, thanks.